Where do you live, Steve?
Washington.
Oh, okay.
Makes you panther. You know, that DCO guy, now he's a Flaming Heart,
Yeah, we know that.
which is near Tutopolis, which those people are.
Wooden shoe. Right, as opposed to the white squirrels from home, right?
Yeah, very good.
You're welcome.
What were you?
The high school I went to, which is now closed because of the breaks, is very boring.
Yeah, there's a church.
Was that grade school?
I got it. The school is still open, but.
We were zippers.
I was a year behind Bonnie Blinner. Who were zippers?
Not around anymore.
Internet things, we miss it by a day, man.
Yeah.
Who was the most famous
God.
person who
Just
graduated
on
from
and
your high
off.
school? Who was the most famous person who graduated from your high school? Because I do.
JP Machado played for the Jets.
We're living here.
Tweet or anything, 'cause the internet's down.
Sorry for the signal change. You know, it is what it is, that's why we call it
Can
news.
you go tweet someplace that works there, 'cause I can't get out of this room.
I usually just call it.
Just
Did you
internet
send
problems
an
with
email
G,
about
I
this?
guess, Steve, we'll be back.
LIS is having internet
Yeah,
problems.
okay.
Yeah, I know, I'm just
We're
curious.
trying to
as
get
to what
everybody
is
here, but
working, what isn't.
not everybody can
I
get
tried
their
going to the
email.
Secretary of State's office,
Yeah, really.
it was like the most confusing.
Internet being down, not everybody is here yet.
Yeah, I know.
So,
Yeah, and it
But
just
we
got
can all
out.
share, right?
We can.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, everything
I mean,
is all over
like-
messed up.
Sunspot.
you ready, Matt?
I'm good.
You ready? We're
You
good, Steve.
ready?
We're good, Steve.
Speaker whenever you're
You
ready.
can put the microphone down a little.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to begin with my prepared statement. Listen very closely, especially you. Are you ready?
All it is.
All right, you'll be greatly surprised to know that I again today pledge to work cooperatively and professionally with the governor. Again, the number one issue facing the state of Illinois is the budget deficit. I don't feel that you can simply cut your way out of the deficit. As a matter of fact, in the governor's cuts-only budget, it greatly slashes medical services for the elderly, the disabled, struggling families. I feel there has to be a balanced approach, some cuts, some new revenue. The legislature has already sent to the governor a bill that would reduce Medicaid spending by $400 million. The spending plan that I support helps and protects middle-class families by supporting local schools, local police, local road programs. The governor's advocacy of non-budget issues works against the core beliefs of both Democrats and Republicans in terms of bringing down wages and the standard of living for middle-class families. In addition, it forces injured workers to go on welfare or to the emergency room. The advocacy of those non-budget issues, in my judgment, takes our work to eliminate the budget deficit to the extreme, takes it away from moderation, and it's only in moderation that we're going to be able to work our way through the problem of the budget deficit, where I think everybody has to be reasonable. Concerning the governor's TV ad, I would just say what I've said previously, that TV ad takes this to the extreme. It takes it away from moderation. It's just like the other non-budget issues.
What was your goal today? What was your goal today?
Our goal today in coming to this press conference?
Either that or what we've been seeing up on the third floor today from the House.
Well, our goal today is to continue to work to eliminate the number one issue facing the state of Illinois, which is the budget deficit. The reason we're here today in the Capitol building and the reason the legislature is still in session, we have not eliminated the budget deficit facing the state of Illinois. And to the extent that people want to eliminate the budget deficit, it has to be done in a reasonable manner. It has to be done in moderation, not in the extreme. Actions taken in the extreme do not help the solution of the budget deficit.
So
What
is
does
that
the
correct?
Have you called the governor?
Excuse me.
The
Do you have a
DCO
question?
thing, what does that have to do with it?
Yeah, have you called the governor, have you said anything to him about this, or do you
No.
plan to?
No, I haven't. No, I haven't.
Are you going to? Then what are you gonna say?
My plan is to be in the Capitol building because the House is going to be in continuous session through the summer, working to eliminate the budget deficit. And I'll be here, I'll be with the other members, and we'll be working on the elimination of the budget deficit. I will be working in moderation. I will not be working on the extreme.
Or are you gonna say, hey, you put this ad out, that's not helpful, I've made public comments about it, but
Yeah.
when you're meeting with him, will you maybe be stronger in, what you remark?
When I meet with the governor, I'm going to reiterate what I told him a few weeks ago, that the number one problem facing the state of Illinois is the budget deficit. And the elimination of that budget deficit will only be done in moderation, not in the extreme. And any actions by anybody in the extreme are not helpful.
For the
The
DCO
governor is making the argument that it took many, many years for the state to find itself in this financial situation, and that you were one of the constants who
Yeah.
was there. He's the new guy, you've been here for all this time. Had two questions. One, has he made that argument to you personally, and also could you just respond to that?
Well, I don't recall if he made that argument to me personally. I'll accept his argument that the current budget deficit and the problem of the accumulated debt of the state has been caused over several years. It's a multi-year problem that's developed. It's going to require strong action by a lot of people in the government to solve those two problems. That's why I continue to argue that if we're to eliminate the budget deficit, if we're to bring down the accumulated debt, everybody has to be reasonable, and everybody has to function in moderation, not in the extreme. I think the governor and I would agree. Number one problem is the budget deficit, and that's what we ought to be about. And to the extent that anybody brings in non-budget issues to try and leverage budget making for non-budget issues, they're operating in the extreme. They're not operating in
But
moderation.
Isn't being part of reasonable and moderate saying, maybe I should reach out to the guy, sit down, have a meeting? He was in the building today. I think
I've had plenty of meetings with the governor. I'm prepared to have more meetings with the governor. I've explained that the advocacy of these non-budget issues is not helpful. But despite that, we have advanced legislation in the House that is responsive to issues that the governor has talked to us about. So the governor has expressed strong interest in changes in workers' compensation. The House has passed a bill. The governor has said privately and publicly that we should do something about real estate taxes. The House, on 4 occasions, has called bills that would freeze real estate taxes. The governor's party has declined to support those bills. 2 of those bills are the exact language that the governor wants on freezing property taxes, and his party has declined to support those bills in the House.
Does he not want a solution?
I really don't know. I don't plan to try and answer that question. I plan to continue to work to eliminate the budget deficit.
You
So
called
as
the
you
Republican.
stand here today, it sounds like there's been absolutely no progress in closing this budget yet. Is that correct?
I'm here to work on the elimination of the budget deficit. The House is going to be in continuous session right through the summer. I don't think that the advocacy of these non-budget issues is helpful, but in the House, we're attempting to be responsive to the governor's interest. That's why, number one, we passed a workers' compensation bill. Number two, we've provided 4 opportunities for House Republicans to pass legislation that would freeze property taxes. Today, we're working on the governor's ideas for changes at the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. So one of the governor's main requests would be to privatize the operations of Deccio. And we had very good faith discussions and negotiations with people from the governor's office. We shared ideas. It was a fruitful conversation. At one point, we expressed to the governor's people that we thought that his new idea should be subject to a sunset. If you know the history of these ideas across the country, it's a mixed bag of performance. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. We've accumulated all of this evidence. It's available today in the Committee of the Whole. We're still prepared to work with the governor to privatize the operations of Deccio, but we're going to do it in such a way that it's done right, based upon the history from all over the country, and we're going to insist that the legislature be in a position to examine the results, look at the performance of the governor's idea over a few years, come back and review it and decide whether we should continue or go back to the old system.
You've called the governor's ads extreme. Now, the Republicans say you've launched your own mailers in the past, recently. Do you consider those actions extreme? And would you consider maybe stopping this war through the airwaves or through the mail and pulling both of these maybe extreme acts if you consider your mailers extreme?
We wouldn't consider the mailers extreme. They were factual. They simply said that certain Republican members had declined to support their governor's request for a freeze in property taxes. That's all they said. They weren't inflammatory. We're not going to do any TV ads, I can tell you that.
Well, his TV ad says you oppose term limits. You do oppose term limits, right?
I support term limits as administered by the voters.
Mr. Speaker, we've
But
heard.
not a constitutional amendment to actually limit the terms of
I
office.
support term limits as administered by the voters. I have faith in the voters.
Mr. Speaker, we've heard our new friend from Effingham, the new director of DCEO, a few times, and he makes it sound like Illinois just flat out stinks. He said today he's embarrassed. Illinois is just an embarrassing place that misuses its fantastic assets, and we ought to be leading with our assets, et cetera. And I was born and raised in Illinois, and it makes me feel like, I don't know, what do you make of some of the things the DCEO fellows say?
Sounds like some political rhetoric that you shouldn't give a lot of time to. He's one of our witnesses today. We're very interested in his ideas for change. We're prepared to support change, but we want to do it the right way. And we've done our research. We've researched every state in the nation that has privatized the operation of their form of Deccio. And we know from that research that sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And our intent is to draft a bill so that it's done correctly.
Was the governor not receptive to a sunset?
When my attorney Heather talked in terms of the idea of a sunset, they got up from the desk, from the table, and walked out of the room.
They said that you were negotiating in bad faith
Well,
by adding it at the last minute.
last minute, that was several weeks ago. We're still here in continuous session.
I didn't mean like last minute, like 1 minute ago. I meant when you guys were putting a bill together.
Well, we were putting a bill together, all right? I mean, you're familiar with negotiations here.
Is the property tax freeze gonna come up a little today?
Is a possibility to be called today?
With, July 1st kind of coming up, is one day out of the week enough to close that budget hole that we've got?
Well, if people are reasonable, there's time to get the job done, okay? There was a previous point made that these two problems have built up over several years. That's true. So they won't be solved in a day, but there's time available to work on that problem and solve that
Do you
problem.
have any thoughts on the mayor's alleged idea about skipping part of the Chicago school pension fund payment?
No.
Do you think that skipping part of that payment is a wise idea?
I have no comment.
Let me-
I'm not involved with the Chicago Board of Education or the City of Chicago.
If we get to July 1st and there's no deal, will the session schedule change? Will you be meeting every day here? Some people are asking, is once a week enough? So the question is, when we get to July 1st, Bruce Rauner says he's not going to pass any sort of temporary budget, and we get to the point where there might be shutdowns, is the schedule gonna become an everyday thing? What's it gonna look like?
The House will be in continuous session through the summer, and we will decide week by week as to what our specific schedule will be.
Would you try and persuade the governor to do a temporary budget if there is no deal? He said no, but he's also
Well-
apparently said that he doesn't want state services to.
Sure, yeah. I'm here to solve the problem of the budget deficit and to work to adopt a spending plan for the next fiscal year. I recognize that in the Illinois government and in the legislature, there's always room for compromise, for agreements, if everybody's reasonable. If everybody's reasonable. People are not being reasonable when they're functioning in the extreme. They have to function in moderation. Everybody should come into moderation, and these problems could be solved.
What steps have been taken since we were here last week to solve the budget issue then? Have there been any steps taken at all?
For my part, I've worked there,
The governor said that the budget issue will be solved with leaders and not the entire General Assembly, so has there been any?
Well, I wouldn't agree with that. You know, everybody is duly elected, and everybody votes when it comes time to vote. So, you know, among the House Democrats, there's full participation on every issue, especially the budget making.
But since June 1st, have the negotiations moved forward? Do you say that, are we somewhere closer than we were?
Well,
on June
we've
1st?
taken positive steps in the House to try to be responsive to the governor on his non-budget issues, even though I feel that his advocacy of the non-budget issues is functioning in the extreme and not in moderation. But despite that view, we've attempted to be responsive. We've passed a bill on workers' compensation. We've given the Rauner Republicans 4 opportunities to pass a tax freeze bills out of the House. Today, we're working with Mr., what's his name, Schultz, on their ideas for changes at DECIO. So the House is in continuous session. We are at work.
When's the last time you spoke with the governor, and do you have plans to speak with him again in the coming days?
I plan to be talking with the governor in the future. I don't recall the last time I talked to him. It wasn't so long ago.
So if there was a government shutdown, who should people blame for it?
Well, I'm not going to get into the blame game. I don't think the government should shut down. I don't think it should shut down. But it's going to require people to be reasonable, not functioning in the extreme.
Do you regret making the income tax increase temporary? I mean, we wouldn't be having this discussion now. Had you took a vote once, leave it there.
No comment.
Is the governor credible right now?
No comment.
How, does this add, not just, is Aaron now, not just change things towards the current budget? I mean, you said name calling doesn't help, being in the extreme doesn't help. Does this help, not help more than other things? And is there a larger cultural shift in Springfield, do you think, because of this? Because of a campaign-style ad airing when we don't have another statewide election until March? Does it change things, or not a big deal? It's just a blimp and...
Look, I'm at work. The House is going to be in continuous session. I'm prepared to do my duty and to fulfill my obligation. I've been through these things before, and I know from those prior experiences that if people are reasonable, you can solve the problems.
Do you think the governor's not being reasonable then?
I didn't say
right
that.
now?
I didn't say that. I think the governor's functioning in the extreme. By his advocacy of non-budget issues, which a majority in the legislature feel reduce the wage level in the state, reduce the standard of living in the state for middle-class families, drive injured workers to the emergency room and to the welfare rolls. That's functioning in the extreme, and that's not helpful to solving the problem.
Coachman said on Chicago Tonight last night that the governor needs to stop campaigning. Do you think the governor is still in campaign mode?
I'm not going to comment on that.
Mr. Speaker, you've been on this theme for, since the last weekend of session back in May. Don't be extreme, be moderate, get off the non-budget issues, et cetera. And I'm getting the idea that every week, we're not making a lot of progress week to week. Is that correct? That, you know, you haven't made a lot of progress since last week?
Oh, I think
On
we're-
getting to a budget.
Yeah, I think we're making progress. You know, I think we're making progress. We're continuing to work on the issues before the General Assembly. As I said earlier, I work 7 days a week on all this.
How about the negotiations we're not seeing on the floor, the behind the scenes, you know, with the leaders and members of the General Assembly? Are those negotiations moving forward?
Slowly, slowly.
So a day away till further notice, here at the Capitol for the whole gang. The session will be in session roughly every Tuesday until it's not? Until
Well,
4 or less?
The House will be in continuous session, and we will decide week by week on the individual schedule. So we plan to be here next Tuesday.
You know what you're gonna be doing next Tuesday on the floor?
Not that I'm going to tell you.
If the governor's been operating in extremes, what are some moves he can take to move back to the moderate where he can?
Oh, I think you can answer that question.
Do you feel like you're getting your, I mean, regardless of what you think of what the governor is doing and he's still reaching the whole state, right? I mean, do you feel like you're getting your side of this out there adequately for average people to understand where you're coming from?
Our encounters with people would say yes. Our encounters with people would say yes.
Your public hearings or just people that you see on the street or?
People that I rode with in an elevator this morning who said that they didn't quite understand why TV commercials were being run in the middle of a legislative session when we're several months after the election and many, many more months before the next election. So, you know, we're in continuous session. We're hard at work. We thank you for your time.
Let's have a question from this young man. He's probably got a better one than me.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Oliver.
He rolled his eyes.
Would you roll your eyes at my
Extreme.
Is it? Did we ask that question? Can we get him back in here to answer that? Is the House in continuous session? Can we get him back?